Support for Postcards from the Road is provided in part by MediaWorks, specialists in video imaging and graphic design.
This time on Postcards from the Road, the crew visits Chattahoochee, Florida. And yes, it is home to the State Mental Hospital, and we'll definitely be going in there. We'll also explore the Woodruff Dam inside and out, talk to prison inmates turned computer whizzes, take a ride through the lock, find out if Vaughn Tipton really is weird, and visit what might just be the Garden of Eden. Our guest host for today is an entrepreneur, a politician, and a gentleman, City Commissioner James Atkins.
Just go on and blow it out. Hello, I'm James Atkins, and da-da-da, boom, boom,
Ready?
boom. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Postcard from the Road, Chattahoochee. I'm your host, James Atkins. When people hear about Chattahoochee, first thing that comes to their mind is the mental hospital and the dam. But I'm here to tell you there's something about Chattahoochee that a lot of people don't know. And the secret to Chattahoochee is it's fishing. And it's a close-knit community of people that showing love for one another.
Although the fish are plentiful and the living easy, there's only one thing that most people think of when you say Chattahoochee, Florida, and that is the massive state hospital for the mentally ill. The hospital dwarfs the North Florida town as a parent that employs nearly 3,000 people and houses over 1,000 mentally ill patients. And although it's been the bread and butter of the tiny town for decades, it hasn't always been that way.
The first settler of our Chattahoochee area was John Tanner, and we were just assuming that he was probably one of Andrew Jackson's troops. He probably stood on these hillsides and thought it looked a bit like Mount Vernon, Virginia. George Washington's home, it was high on the hill overlooking the river.
And a breathtaking view it is, as bluffs stand tall over the Apalachicola River, a river that is still home to an Indian mound, which reflects back to Chattahoochee's first residents, the Paleo Indians, nearly 15,000 years ago. And then there's the secret that is hidden no more about Chattahoochee. Jim Woodruff Dam, the Apalachicola River, and that means fish and more fish.
It was 38 pounds and 4 ounces, and the record now is 38.9.
Should have come yesterday. We rode, man. It was some brim caught yesterday and shell crackers.
But most of all, if you want to get heads turning in this tiny town, mention E.E. Calloway and his theory that Chattahoochee is the home of the Garden of Eden. You got it, the garden, with Adam, Eve, and the fig leaves. Well, let me try this theory on you for size. Descending down into the tropical lushness of the Apalachicola Bluffs, we know that Florida was once connected to Africa, but was separated through time. Stay with me now, this is where it gets real good. Along the river there used to grow a rare tree that Noah made the ark of, the Torah, which is gopher wood.
They say that there were some in the 1800s that were good-sized trees, so conceivably it could have been big enough to build a boat out.
He's good.
And then it later drifted over to the mountains of Ararat during the flood.
Ah, this guy's better.
And of course, then the gopher wood, having been the wood that the Genesis 6:14 says Noah built the ark of.
Where's Eve in the apple?
One of the rivers mentioned in Genesis is one of the rivers, Pishon or Gihon or something, comes from the land of Havilah, where the gold is good.
But what about Eve?
I've also heard the orange may have been the forbidden fruit.
That's it. This guy's too good. What the? Just go and blow it out this time. Just want to blow it out.
You see, it's the dam that creates the ideal environment for fish to grow. Around here, everybody got a fish story to tell. Each one is bigger than the next. I hope you know what I mean.
Starts pulling away 'cause it's a pretty big fish. And I start leaning into it, and the boat flips over. And we fell in the lake with the alligators and the fish, but I still had the fish on the line. So I worked my way up the shore, and I brought the fish in. So we ate him. He was good.
It takes a pretty good ability to be a fantasy artist, because a lot of times you're doing things that you can't see. But I don't think they get the credit they really deserve. A lot of people don't take fantasy art seriously, I don't believe. In the let's say, the upper crust of the art world.
Artist Vaughn Tipton's point is supported by the fact that fantasy art is often associated with science fiction book covers and heavy metal bands. Nevertheless, he has remained true to his style.
I was brought up in the Christian way. It's a matter of choice. I think our Maker give us a mind. He give us a mind to use for whatever our talent was, you know. He made people different. Everybody's different. I look at things differently. What's maybe scary to some people or just something creative for me.
Vaughn's look at the world of fantasy spans from one side.
Well, I've always been familiar with that old song, Beautiful Dreamer, that Stephen Foster wrote, and it's just kind of my takeoff on that.
To the other.
When I was a kid, there was no story like the ghost story, you know. Now, a lot of things that maybe I paint that people see as scary is more of a fascination for me of the unknown. I just like the unknown. I've always liked cats, and cats lend themselves to mythology and folklore. White cats represent to me a more acceptable cat. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the black cat that people always associate with the magic and folklore.
He's normal. I mean, he's not any of the things these people walk around here and think. I had a lady to approach me one day and said, because she knew that Vaughn and I were seeing each other, and she says, "Don't you think he is so strange?" And I said, "No, ma'am, not really. You know, he believes in God."
Vaughn's companion, Martha Fierro, shares his passion for fantasy and on occasion puts what he can only paint into words.
If there's a certain something that he wants something written on, I'll say, well, you know, tell me what you were feeling. What are the feelings you had? And then I'll tell you what I see and what I feel.
One of the paintings that Martha has written poetry to is called Something in the Wind.
With the moon as his ever-guiding light to help ease the oncoming night, mixed within the mystical world which few have yet to discover. There's a change coming nearer, gentle whispers of warning, truly able to expect the unexpected, yet not confident of what reaction will be given.
Having remained true to himself, Vaughn is starting to see that over the years, his patrons have remained true to him. His sales are up, his shows are well attended, and if that's not enough, when he's not painting his own fantasy, he's painting someone else's.
Fantasy portraits, you know, I would use people in whatever they might like, you know, whatever era they might like, or whatever strikes their fancy, so to speak.
While it's fantasy that Vaughn paints, it's reality in the form of sales that pays the bills. So, to make his fantasy of being a full-time artist a reality, Vaughn has made his brother, Gene Tipton, his manager.
He's got an idea in his mind. It's like, not now, I gotta do this. And it just about kills him if he can't. He gets in a really bad mood if he can't get that idea down.
Well, really, all my life, I have felt a deep-rooted need to do what I do. When I paint, I'm happy.
Well, we got some over in Lake Seminole. It's that broad, about 20 inches from the nose to the eyes, and those shoulders on them about 2 feet broad, and there's some of them 15, 16 feet long. So.
They fought that fish in real fast so the alligator wouldn't catch it on the way into the boat.
There are lots of sights and sounds characteristic of Chattahoochee, but none are as imposing as the massive Jim Woodruff Dam, power plant, and lock. And certainly nothing has ever impacted this place or its people more.
It was James Waldrow Woodruff, a mechanical and electrical engineer, businessman, and financier from Columbus, Georgia, who first envisioned the potential at the place where 3 rivers and 3 states all meet. And the idea held great promise for Chattahoochee and the whole region. A plan for the project was first presented to Congress as early as 1934, and again in 1939. But it wasn't until after the war that the Florida, Georgia, and Alabama delegations could join forces and sponsor legislation that was finally approved in 1946. Construction on the $58 million project began the following year, and when it was completed 10 years later, it changed forever the character of the sleepy swamps along the Flint, Chattahoochee, and Apalachicola River basins.
The dam is, in its entirety, is 1.2 miles long. And that's going to compose itself of an earthen dam, a concrete dam with lift gates that you see the water going through, a powerhouse, a locking dam, and also a fixed crest spillway, which is actually just 2 feet higher than the normal pool of the lake. The lake is 37,500 acres, and we have approximately 18,000 acres of land that surround the lake.
Rangers from the Army Corps of Engineers are the project's custodians.
We are involved in recreation management and natural resource management. We provide approximately 28 public use areas for the public. A normal public use area will lend itself to picnic sites, a boat ramp for people to launch their boat, parking areas, primitive camping, playground equipment and stuff for children to use. So we have a variety out here to offer. We try to maintain a balance between the recreational aspect, the fish and wildlife aspect, the navigational and flood control aspects of the project, the power production. So it's multi-purpose.
Certainly a good part of the dam's power is electrical. Enough of it, in fact, to light up a city the size of Bainbridge, Georgia.
We have 30 megawatts capacity. That's 30 million watts. And it's instantaneous. We generate around the clock, and we're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
3 giant turbine generators turn out some 220 million kilowatt hours of energy a year, and they've been doing it almost continuously since they went online in the spring of 1957.
We're connected with 2 utilities, public utilities. We're connected with Florida Power Corporation and with Gulf Power Corporation. And they in turn are tied together through our switch yard. They buy and sell from each other, plus our power goes where it's needed.
We sell this power to the power companies, and we return this money to the Treasury. And that actually, this project is a money-making project, $4 or $5 million a year.
So what's the best thing to catch a fish with?
Crickets and patagas worms. They bite them quicker than anything else. Wigglers, they like them very much. Just hook him in the middle where he be moving, and they catch him. Some use artificial bait, but I don't like it because you can fool a trout, but you don't fool brims and catfish with no artificial bait. They got to be real.
Prison inmates, strong, healthy men and women with nothing to do all day but sit around. Throughout history, heads of state, prison wardens, and politicians have looked upon incarcerated criminals as an irresistible resource, a group of people who needed to be reformed through hard work. In Florida, prison labor was officially initiated in 1877 by the Redeemer Governor George F. Drew and implemented right here in Chattahoochee by a carpetbagger named Malachi Martin. At the state's first penitentiary, which is now Florida State Hospital, Warden Martin set up a program through which prisoners were leased out to private companies. During Warden Martin's term, many inmates didn't have to finish their sentence because they died before it was up. They were worked, starved, or beaten to death. Since those early days, things have changed quite a bit.
Well, right now I'm working in Microstation 4.0, and we're doing a sewer utility overlay file for the city of Jacksonville.
What we try to do is teach the inmates on how to do computerized drafting, and we'll take a manually drawn drawing, architectural floor plan or map, and convert it to an electronic image using some of the more popular CAD software that's in place in the private and public sector. The idea is that once they learn the CAD commands, they are ready for an entry-level type position, and sometimes more than entry-level once they leave the facility.
PRIDE stands for Prison Rehabilitative Industries and Diversified Enterprises. Chartered by the state in 1981, PRIDE is a self-funded, non-profit corporation created to train inmates, provide them with work experiences, and then use their skills and labor to produce goods and services. In return, inmates receive a nominal hourly wage, gain time, and most importantly, a marketable skill. For each prison industry, PRIDE supplies facilities, training, equipment, and raw materials, and the correctional facility provides the inmate labor and security.
We fund all of our operations. I mean, the products that we sell basically funds PRIDE. We don't get any tax support. We're not state funded in any way.
PRIDE goods and services are sold to tax-supported governmental agencies, both in Florida and in other states. Putting criminals to work, reforming them, sounds like a great concept, and yet some small businesses say there's a conflict. They claim that PRIDE has access to cheap labor, which enables them to compete unfairly with small businesses that offer the same goods and services as PRIDE does. In response, PRIDE claims that small businesses don't understand all the costs that working with inmates incurs.
We have other costs that private sector companies just don't have to incur. We have, for one thing, our training costs. These inmates come to us with very little education. Most of them have never had a job before. A lot of them don't have the best attitudes, and they're people that private sector companies, a lot of them would not hire.
The bottom line is that PRIDE believes that it's never too late for an individual to turn themselves around.
Yes, I've become more professional. I've developed better work ethic since I've been here, and learned how to get along with, people, because prison is not the environment where you want to come to make friends, but, we learn how to get along and work together with each other. So, yes, personally, I've changed a lot.
Okay, what you got to have really is a waterproof, leak-proof, spill-proof combination tackle box and coffee table like I've got here. I can't understand how people around here can even go to church without a 5-gallon bucket. I've got my leads, my hooks, my two-way swivels, and whenever I get rigged, this is essentially what I end up with, my hook.
What is it? A shell cracker or brand? Cool.
6623, 660. 10-4, we're coming in from the north side. Can you lock us through?
Roger, I'll go ahead and explain the gate. Over.
10-4, we'll be there in a second. Just go ahead and do what you got to do. 233.
Another part of the Jim Woodruff Dam project, vital to boating traffic, is the navigation lock along the west bank.
We direct them inside the lock chamber and tell them to tie onto one of the 4 mooring bits on either side of the lock. There's 4 mooring bits. They're floating mooring bits, by the way, that raises and lowers with the water as the chamber is filled or emptied. We close the gates behind them, make sure that the upstream valves are closed, go out there and visibly inspect the gates to make sure they're mitered. Then we proceed to the lower end, into the lower lock control stand. It takes about 10 minutes to empty the chamber. And while it's emptying, we make sure that the boats is all right and there's no people in the water going and swimming, which does happen occasionally. If we get somebody overboard swimming, we have to direct them to get back in the boat because possibly they could get sucked out through one of the valves.
The chamber holds about 9 million gallons of water. It's gravity fed, there's no pumping. Hydrostatic force of the lake brings the water into the lock chamber when the valves are open until it equalizes out, and then the upper valves are closed, and then the lower valves are open slowly, and gravity pulls the water down to the lower levels, and then those valves are closed. But the gates are operated hydraulically.
A normal routine locking, approximately 30 minutes.
Okay, the top all fish stores in this little town is the one they caught down at the river about 6 years ago. The fish was not that great in size, but it took 2 cranes to pick it up to get it out of the water. When they got it out of the water, instead of it being a fish, there was a boat anchor. And they kept pulling on it, and they got the big fish out. But it was just a giant catfish that weighed 261 pounds, which was the record of this river was 261 pound channel catfish of this river.
Well, I'm working full-time. It's important that I show myself that I can do it, you know, regardless of what other people think.
But this is nice to wear to church or, you know, to wear to work or something like that.
Does extremely well with the customers and help for relationships and sizing, and she has to know their styles with different type people.
Although we seldom acknowledge it till it affects us personally, there's a thin line for all of us between sanity and insanity. Our normalities of life are no longer normal, and thus some of us may need hospitalization at the Florida State Hospital for the mentally ill. A thin line.
As an athlete, I could never predict when I was going to have a seizure. Then it would definitely have a psychological effect on me.
Basically, it's a lot of friends I've seen, and I have to talk to them, you know, tell them, you know, hey man, you look like you're going over the edge and stuff like that, you know.
Well, I had been working at the University of Florida for 5.5 years. I was administrative assistant.
Deborah is hailed as a model patient by her psychiatric doctors and the vocational rehabilitation manager at her job as a clothing assistant at the hospital. But like all of our lives, hers and other patients has been a jigsaw puzzle, pieced together, bit by bit, only sometimes to break apart.
My crime was I shot a lady in the head and she's blind. They accused me of first-degree attempted murder, but I was cleared of those charges with NGI, which is...
Not guilty by reason of insanity.
Right.
Before becoming insane on that dark day in her life, she had become depressed about a number of things in her life, and extremely depressed after finding out her son had been charged with attempted murder at the age of 13.
I withdrew from my friends and from my family, and I was isolated.
A person becomes extremely depressed and is not able to shake this depression. A person has demonstrated that he simply can't cope outside of the hospital, outside of a supervised situation.
How you cope is not necessarily something, too, that society is judging for you. It may be what you're doing. You may be drinking and nobody knows about it. DUIs, we call DUIs, but we don't necessarily figure out why people are drinking.
After having his first mental breakdown soon after high school, Alfonso was soon on the streets again without proper direction or knowledge of how to deal with problems. Problems that ended with him killing a stranger in cold blood one day on a Miami street corner.
It gets pretty hectic, you know. I mean, you know, not even to say that about just romance, you know, your girlfriend, you're not doing well, you don't have a job. You think of different things compound, you know.
You know, there are no guarantees in life, and if you have a good childhood, you're steadily employed, you have a good marriage, healthy children, and a long life, why then is probably the average person can get through with that. But if you're met with unexpected adversity, why then you're likely to need some help. And it's certainly nothing to be shameful. We all need help once in a while, and people just react to stress in different ways.
Don't ignore the early warning signs of mental illness, like you get slightly depressed and you think it's nothing, but then it goes on for days and months and you become withdrawn from society. You know, it's time to seek help.
Make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Don't take my sunshine away.
Make sure the background, look at the background.
Well, let's do another one to give you a big one. You know what I mean by big one?
Well, this is the end of our show. I'm your host, James Atkins. Hope you enjoyed the show. Goodbye. Okay? Chitlins was not really an expensive food item. And it was very important when you kill hogs, you get the chitlins, they will give them away to you. You know, you could go and help clean them, and then you carry them home.
Here, can we have one more fork?
Okay.
Good? That really is good. No, it's the thought that I have a little trouble with.
If you tell people, say, well, you're eating the intestines of a hog, they say, or you eating the stomach, they say, you know. But it's go with the taste and the appearance. Regardless, whatever it is, if it look good and you taste it and it tastes good, you can consume it.
That's nice.
Thanks.
Support for Postcards from the Road is provided in part by MediaWorks, specialists in video imaging and graphic design.